This is News Pulse, a beating heart of the news from Ukraine and for the world. My name is Henry Keane and we are UATV English. We debunk Russian lies and deliver Ukrainian truth for all our global sake. Hello. Topics to dissect for today. What is happening at the front lines of Ukraine? Another topic is 100 days of Donald Trump, the results. And the topic also to discuss new offensive from Belarus. Is that real? Well, in this first topic, I'm not going to give you any video or footage on how Ukrainians are actually fighting on the very front line. Brave, but you can easily Google that yourself. What I'm intended to do today is to give you just one but very vivid example of what is going on with regards to Ukrainian success on the front line and let you see it for yourself. So, on the Novopavlivka front line, Russian forces are deploying small assault groups, often moving on cross-country motorcycles to approach Ukrainian positions quickly. However, most of them approach on foot. Denis Bobkov, senior communications officer of Ukraine's 37th Separate Marine Brigade, confirms that, and he also says that those Russian troops advancing on foot rely heavily on camouflage, in particular anti-thermal cloaks, to make themselves invisible to thermal imaging and sights of our sniper rifles, of course. However, the tactic has its, limitations, to put it mildly.
Russia delivered a fresh batch of so-called anti-drone coats to its troops in Lyman. One might expect them to be harder to detect now, but they've only become more relaxed and started wandering through open areas. It seems they believe they're wearing invisibility cloaks. Our pilots at the 63rd Brigade explained to 14 of them that they're actually wearing garbage bags. Denis Bobkov, senior communications officer of Ukraine's 37th Separate Marine Brigade.
Ukraine's General Staff reports on 178 combat clashes on the front lines in the past 24 hours only. According to the update released at 8 o'clock in the morning of 29th of April, Russian forces lost 1,060 KIA and wounded in a single day of fighting. Well, obviously, those invisibility cloaks are not working. And not only thermal cloaks. No. We all heard Soviet dictator Putin asking for a ceasefire during his beloved 9th of May parade, right? Well, obviously, fearing Ukrainians could send him a couple of hundreds of unmanned aerial hellos. As a reminder that this parade is nothing but a pseudo-patriotic fascist bacchanalia and not a victory parade at all. As back then, during World War II, there were several fronts, named literally First Ukrainian Front, Second Ukrainian Front, Third Ukrainian Front, etc., where millions of Ukrainians, together with Russians, fought against Nazis. And where have these Ukrainian fronts shifted these days, I wonder? That's right, it shifted to Ukrainian soil. And how many Ukrainians will be there cheering Putin at the Red Square this time? None. As Russia is killing Ukrainian children in Ukraine in broad daylight, sending cluster warheads on Ukrainian cities, trying to cloak it under some forged reasons, but it just doesn't work, as there should be no reason for killing children with cluster munitions, as simple as that. And if there is a reason, then it's Putin's lust for Russian power and Ukrainian blood. And the day will come when Vladimir Putin personally will wish he is wearing that invisibility cloak that his orcs are using today in Ukraine, but here's my prophecy, it just as well won't work. Oh my God, another fire in Russia. It's a defense plant owned by Rostec these days in the city of Murom. The premises and the stock warehouse were destroyed. A drone strike hit the Murom instrument production plant, which is also known locally as the powder plant. Right, tells by itself. It produces ignition and initiation systems for munitions used by the Russian armed forces and other security agencies, as reported by Russian media, by the way. According to the governor of Vladimir Oblast, Alexander Avdeyev, a large fire broke out at the facility covering an area of 720 square meters, and since 2023, the plant has been under sanctions by Ukraine and Europe, and there is a great deal of a reason for that.
The enterprise manufactures a wide range of pyrotechnic devices used to activate emergency systems in aviation, maritime, and ground-based vehicles, as well as in space applications, including manned missions. Its main clients include the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Internal Affairs, FSB, Emergency Situations Ministry, the state corporation Rosatom, the Federal Space Agency Roscosmos, and hundreds of enterprises within the Russian military-industrial complex. From a publication in the Russian journal National Defense in 2020,
according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, drones attacked several regions across the country. It claims that air defenses allegedly intercepted and destroyed 34 Ukrainian UAVs, 15 over Kursk region, 8 over Bryansk, 7 over Oryol, 3 over Vladimir, and just 1 over Belgorod region. Well, what can I add to it? I wonder how many UAVs actually reached their targets successfully. As we all probably already noticed, Donald Trump made an extraordinary return to power in 2024 after a landslide win in the elections, and there has been a lot really going on after his inauguration. Tariff wars with everybody, you name it, broken promises to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. In fact, he many times promised that. So, here are the keys to the Trump's castle, briefly for you. Aggressive government overhaul, that is mass layoffs and budget cuts. Thousands of federal workers fired, entire departments like the Department of Education targeted for elimination. Well, who needs education these days in America, right? Just watch Fox News. Elon Musk, heading the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, played a central role in these cost-cutting measures. Harvard sued the Trump administration after losing billions of dollars in federal funding over non-compliance with government mandates. Another thing is tariffs and trade wars, sweeping new tariffs on imports from China, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union up to staggering 145% in some cases, triggered global financial instability. Trump declared that made him a liberation day for U.S. economic independence. Markets plunged and over $2.5 trillion was lost on Wall Street in just 24 hours. Well, if the whole point was to liberate markets from stability and money, then liberation it is. Ukraine-Russia war and foreign policy chaos. Another achievement, Trump's administration paused military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine for some weeks, until Ukraine for the first time agreed to a non-conditional ceasefire. And as that was not enough, a scandalous Oval Office meeting with Zelensky on February 28th followed and ended in public fallout and months of political turmoil and uncertainty. In the end, backfiring at the United States, devastating its reputation as a reliable partner. Trump pushed for a minerals deal. Next thing, with Ukraine, seen as precondition for U.S. security guarantees, securing United States control over most of vital Ukrainian resources, including on the occupied territories, just by the way. Negotiations are still ongoing, but again, whatever it is, the world largely sees that as an act of extortion. And now, my favorite duck-up. U.S. officials, led by Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth, accidentally leaked Yemen war plans on Signal Messenger. Way to go. Sparking a security scandal, obviously, and lowering the trust level to the new administration significantly. Well, significantly may not be the right term. Below zero, I would say. New low, indeed. Already 4 meetings were held between Trump's envoy, Witkoff, and Putin. Another thing. The stance on Russia-Ukraine war is still ambiguous and is getting more ambiguous with every meet.
He is increasingly frustrated with leaders of both countries. He wants to see a permanent ceasefire. I understand Vladimir Putin this morning offered a temporary ceasefire. The president has made it clear he wants to see a permanent ceasefire first to stop the killing, stop the bloodshed. And while he remains optimistic he can strike a deal, he's also being realistic as well.
Elon Musk. Elon Musk's influence. Musk has oversaw mass firings and budget cuts across the whole American government. For the first time in the history of America, a businessman was granted such a discrete right to affect government spending and resources. He was central to DOG's actions and appeared in cabinet meetings, despite having actually no formal role whatsoever. Conflict of interest raised concerns due to his ties to China and government contracts with Musk companies. Ever thought of a person who actually had enough money and influence to send humanity to space, literally, but has chosen more money and more power? Think of Elon Musk. Also, Trump's isolationist diplomacy upset NATO and EU allies. His decisions and actions are pure impulse, to me at least. J.D. Vance's remarks about annexing Greenland, strained relations with Denmark and the EU, key partners and allies of America for decades. Trump repeatedly wavered on sanctions and diplomacy with Russia and China, and apparently has some ambition to become the new Pope.
As Pope? I'd like to be Pope. That would be my number one choice. No, I don't know. I have no preference. I must say we have a cardinal that happens to be out of a place called New York who's very good. So we'll see what happens.
I'm sorry, I can clearly see the picture. Like Donald Trump is standing near Jesus Christ, who's nailed to the cross, and then Donald Trump says, "That would never have happened if I was president." Well, those were the first 100 days of Donald Trump as the President of the United States of America in his second coming. We still have talks and negotiations daily and promises to end the bloodshed in Ukraine, but we also hear threats to leave the negotiation process for good if no visible progress happens, whatever the term progress means there. I wonder if a new Russian strike force gathering in Belarus could be the one, according to the President of Ukraine. What about that, Mr. Trump? The UN said that they have noticed that shelling of Ukraine by Russia has increased, despite talk of peace from the Kremlin. Wow, what a quick eye from UN. This was reported at a meeting of the Security Council by the UN Under-Secretary General for Political Affairs, Rosemarie DiCarlo. Despite Putin's statements, the number of civilian deaths is only growing due to indiscriminate strikes by Russian missiles and drones on residential buildings and areas. According to the UN, and anyone who has eyes, these days the number of civilians killed and wounded in Ukraine has increased and is increasing every month compared to the previous.
We condemn all attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure, wherever they occur. Directing attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure is prohibited under international humanitarian law and must cease immediately. The Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine stands as an egregious challenge to these fundamental principles, jeopardizing stability in Europe and threatening the broader international order.
And on top of that, a threat from Belarus is possible, very possible again this year. This was announced by Volodymyr Zelensky. However, it is not known against whom it will be actually directed, possibly against one of the NATO countries. All this will be prepared under the guise of joint Russian-Belarusian military exercises, as Russia often does.
And look at Belarus. Russia is preparing something there this summer, using military drills as cover. And that's usually how they start a new attack. But where will it go? I don't know. Ukraine, Lithuania, Poland, God bless, no. But we all need to be ready.
In Belarus, however, which is essentially nothing else but a Russian proxy, preparations for massive military exercises are already underway. This is exactly how the large-scale invasion of Ukraine started in 2022. At that time, the Russian military presence near the borders of Ukraine mounted from summer 2021 and was also justified precisely by military maneuvers. So maybe the UN should turn their quick eye to that. Russia is threatening Europe right now while you are watching this very episode. Stay tuned to see what exactly is happening.
Russia intensifies hybrid warfare against NATO members. The Netherlands has uncovered a cyber attack by Russian hackers targeting the infrastructure of a government agency. In addition, a critical infrastructure facility also came under attack, an incident The Hague believes could be part of preparations for potential sabotage. According to the Ministry of the Interior, Russia's cyber aggression is aimed at destabilizing society.
The fact that they are willing to sabotage a public service in the Netherlands is, by itself, is sort of example that they are increasing their risks. You look at the speed of which Russia is increasing its military complex, its equipment, its artillery. It's by far much faster than we do in Europe, even in the US. That creates what I would mention as a sort of window of vulnerability for us.
Russia is indeed rapidly scaling up its military-industrial capabilities. The aggressor state reportedly produces around 300 T-90M Prorov tanks annually. Yet these tanks are not primarily used in the ongoing full-scale war against Ukraine. They largely remain within Russia's territory, the Wall Street Journal reports. Of concern as well is the Kremlin's intensified military recruitment campaign and its expansion of military logistics, especially along its northern borders.
While President Trump and many other world leaders are preoccupied with the war in Ukraine, some Europeans are increasingly concerned about what the Russian army is doing much more quietly along other parts of its border with Europe. About 100 miles east of the Finnish border, in the Russian city of Petrozavodsk, military engineers are expanding army bases. The Kremlin plans to create a new army headquarters that will oversee tens of thousands of troops over the next few years. From the Wall Street Journal.
We all agree in NATO that Russia is the long-term threat to NATO territory, to the whole of the Euro-Atlantic territory.
According to a report from Denmark's Military Intelligence Service, there is a high risk of a large-scale war in Europe within the next 5 years if Russia perceives NATO as weak. Similar conclusions have been drawn by Germany's Federal Intelligence Service, which believes that a direct military conflict is likely to break out before the end of this decade.
We will continue to strengthen our armed forces, the Bundeswehr, and we will step up investments in our defense industry. We will work hard to meet our commitments to NATO's regional plans. We will continue to be Ukraine's strongest supporter in Europe to uphold its freedom and its sovereignty and its European future. And we will strive to make Germany, both its military and its infrastructure, the backbone of conventional defense in Europe.
According to Vadim Skibitsky, deputy chief of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Russia has outlined 15 potential military conflict scenarios through 2045, 6 of which involve Northern Europe. He states that Moscow aims to complete the active phase of its war against Ukraine by 2026 and then redirect its main military forces toward aggression against European countries. Poland, he warns, could be the first target.
I can assure you his ambitions will grow. If Ukraine will not withstand, then he will go on and surely already has the textbooks of history, which tells who is the real owner of the territory of Poland, Hungary, and so on. So he will move on. That's why I told you to be pragmatic. We need to stop Putin in order not to take any risk, I mean for the world.
In response, the Kremlin has accused NATO of aggressive actions toward Russia. Putin's aide, Nikolai Patrushev, recently claimed that for a second year in a row, NATO exercises near Russia's borders are allegedly simulating scenarios for seizing the Kaliningrad region and launching preemptive strikes on Russia's nuclear forces. Patrushev also named several European political figures as posing a direct threat to Russia, including the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen, and Secretary General of NATO Mark Rutte. Reported by Larissa Petruk, UATV News.
Well, that seems to be it for tonight. My name is Henry Keane, and we are News Pulse by UATV English, beating hearts of the news from Ukraine and for the world. We're doing our best to debunk Russian lies and deliver Ukrainian perspective for all of our global stake. So stay safe and tune for more ready tomorrow. Goodbye.